Anthony Richardson, Trey Benson, and Jermaine Burton were the biggest losers coming out of week one of the preseason. We'll explain why on this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. And joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. You can also read her at Yahoo Fantasy. On today's show, we are discussing the biggest losers coming out of week one of the preseason. And Kate, let's start with Colts quarterback Anthony Richardson, who it was awesome to see him back on the field, but I think his performance left a little bit to be desired.
I do think that we have some blinders here for Anthony Richardson. It's time we air them out because this is a dynasty podcast, right? Like, I don't think there's anybody here that would disagree that Anthony Richardson performing as the overall QB1 in fantasy football this year is out of the realm of possibility. What we have to wonder is, like, what is his long-term prospect here in this offense? Because, Marcus, year one, I said, obviously looked tremendous as a rusher, was a top 5 fantasy asset in 2 of his 4 starts in 2024. Both of those games were the only games he started and finished. So, upside's pretty great. What's a little bit concerning for me is that, yes, this is his preseason debut coming off a season-ending shoulder injury, but I'm going to be honest, my biggest concern for Anthony Richardson coming out was his accuracy as a passer. To this point, not really sure. And again, small sample size, but not sure we've seen all that much steps forward. Like, at what point does it become a concern if we don't see him making strides as a passer?
Well, I'm not going to freak out over the first preseason game coming off of a major shoulder injury, right?
Yes.
Like, I'm not freaking out yet. However, did I watch that game and go, like, this looks rough? Yeah. I mean, he missed a couple wide open receivers. He had one of his first passes was almost intercepted. He had a pass to Kyler Granson that was way behind him. That should have been an easy first down. Instead, they had to punt. The offense, I believe, got 1 first down in the 2 drives that he was on the field. He just looked off, and that's to be expected. Like, if you are a young quarterback that's missed that much time, we should expect you not to look 100% healthy and not to look 100% accurate, right? But I think it is just a reminder of how raw he is. And when you look at, Kate, where he's being drafted among other quarterbacks, like Patrick Mahomes, pretty good. Josh Allen, good. Lamar Jackson, 2-time MVP. Jalen Hurts has been to the Super Bowl. CJ Stroud, awesome rookie year. And then there's Anthony Richardson, who's played 4 games, who played 13 games at Florida. Like, this is somebody who is incredibly raw. We are betting on the upside, but there's also a chance that we just get a lot of these games where the Colts offense struggles. The accuracy just isn't there. And I think of all these quarterbacks, and I'll finish up quickly here, of all these quarterbacks, he's the most likely to not be a starter in 2 years, whereas all the other quarterbacks, like, barring injury, they're going to be 10-year starters.
That is hitting the nail on the head here for Richardson, because it's not about necessarily his upside just for 2023 or 2024. We already know what that upside is, but you have to also look at the actual situation of the quarterback, right? Take Justin Fields, for example, who I think, maybe this is probably like the most recent example just in our heads of absolute superstar when it comes to fantasy football because of that tremendous rushing upside, that athleticism. And even when you're, picturing what he could do in an offense, it feels like the upside is absolutely infinite, even from a real life NFL perspective. But if they can't turn these things that are problems, right? The accuracy, the throws behind, like if you can't translate those into some better performances as the year goes on, as he gets more reps, then the longevity in the NFL is going to be a viable concern. And I think he's the only player in that range that I really have that concern in terms of his floor as a passer, that like, yes, rushing upside can get you so much, but it can't.
Well, I will also say there's a scenario, Kate, that plays out this year where he becomes a top 5 fantasy quarterback, but actually is not a great NFL quarterback that actually hurts his chances of keeping a job. I think a good recent example of this is Justin Fields, right? Like whenever Justin Fields would play, he would post fantastic fantasy numbers, but the week-to-week consistency and the passing consistency just wasn't good enough for the Bears, and they moved on after 3 years. I'm not predicting that for Anthony Richardson, but there is a scenario where he's awesome for fantasy, but not great for the Colts, and all of a sudden that means we have a top 6 quarterback 2 years from now that is a backup. I think that is in the world of possibilities for Richardson. I'm still betting that he's going to turn out, but I will say that I was a little nervous watching that preseason game on Sunday.
And let me just say that I'm not going out. I'm not selling my Anthony Richardson shares. I'm not doing it, but this does kind of give me some context with which I'm going to watch Anthony Richardson a bit more closely in this regard moving forward, because I did kind of expect a leap forward. He is playing with a pretty solid receiving core. Obviously, Josh Downs went down with an injury, but A.D. Mitchell playing out of the slot a bit. Like there's a lot to like between some of the pass catching options here for the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah.
I want to see some progression there, especially given the fact that they have upgraded that receiving core a bit over the past couple of seasons. So is it something that I'm automatically hitting the panic button on? No, but he definitely wasn't a preseason winner, and he has me on a little bit of a high alert right now. Just,
I think that's fair.
Tempering my overall excitement in Dynasty specifically rather than redraft, but it's a context with which you have to watch him very closely moving forward, because that can have a tremendous impact on how long he lasts as an NFL quarterback.
Absolutely. No, we're not saying to go out and sell any of your Anthony Richardson shares. I just thought this was a time or a chance for him to really build some hype. Instead, it was the opposite. I felt a little deflated after watching him against the Broncos. He wasn't the only player that didn't stand out this week. Let's talk about Trey Benson, a player that we absolutely love, and why we thought he had a rough week 1. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's the formula for winning championships, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen today. Now go make your second listen to Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Get daily insights to the best fantasy draft strategies so that you can win your league this season. I'm already getting ready. I've been listening to Vinny and Michelle. They've been helping me out a ton. A couple big drafts coming up this weekend. So you should be listening to them as well. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Kate, let's talk about Trey Benson, a running back that you and I both really like coming out of Florida State. I had him as my RB1. He was drafted in round 3. We thought maybe he could take over this job, maybe by the end of training camp. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem like that's going to happen.
Doesn't seem like that's going to happen. Although, like, I mean, I'm going to say his preseason debut, some ups and downs. He's only 22 years old, just turned 22 here in the last month. Not necessarily a guy that has a ton of collegiate experience, 316 career rush attempts. He's never handled a full workload. So kind of a lot of the stuff that we saw out of him, he's 6 foot, 216 pounds. He's got the size. He's got tremendous speed, 4.39 40-yard dash. But a lot of the things that we saw were things that necessarily, like, I didn't necessarily think were indicative of his super long-term outlook, but it did temper my expectations here for 2023 or 2024 and him making a significant impact on day one, which, I mean, we all saw James Conner last year, probably one of the most underrated seasons that we've seen from a running back in recent memory, just because of his age. I feel like he's kind of been written off. Obviously, he has health concerns as well. So it's not a foregone conclusion that Benson will get some sort of opportunity. But, some ups and downs, maybe in terms, didn't always see the field the way that I had hoped. Like the vision wasn't necessarily 100% from Benson here in his preseason debut. He also played pretty deep into the second quarter. His last snap of the game was just with 1:15 left in the first half here. So got some reps early, played relatively early here in the first quarter, but also, was pretty involved as the game went on. Now, do I think that's a good thing? Probably. Yeah, I think he could probably use some live game reps. So, but that just tells us kind of where he's at in the pecking order.
I didn't love what I saw from him. I think it was 8 carries for 21 yards, Kate. It just did not look great in this game. Didn't look like any like the player that we saw at Florida State. If you're watching with us on YouTube right now, you can see the advanced numbers: 96 percentile rushing grade, 100th percentile missed tackle force rate per attempt, 91st percentile yards after contact per attempt. He looked like a running back whose head was spinning, right? The game was moving too fast for him. He was struggling to see the holes. Now, this Arizona offensive line was not opening him up big holes either, but he looked hesitant to me. And when I watched him, my first takeaway is, oh, this is James Conner's job all year. Like, it would have to be, Conner would have to miss time in order for Benson to become a player for this Cardinals team, like a dynasty asset, or sorry, like a redraft asset. And even then, I wonder, like, what would the Cardinals do if James Conner went down? I think my hopes of Benson being like a week 2 starter at the running back position, because he just looks so dynamic, I think, I don't want to say it's gone, but I'm not anticipating that at all. This very, very much feels like it's going to be James Conner's backfield. Benson's going to rotate in probably more in the second half of the season, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, and I'm not taking this too hard here, because James Conner has played too darn well in the past season, and I think to this point still looks very much in shape. He looks fantastic, and I don't see why you would seep away a workload from him. But I mean, this performance that we saw from Benson, I think, kind of matches the narrative that we've seen from training camp. There's been a lot of hype for like Amari DiMercato in this offense, more hype than you've seen for Trey Benson here through the training camp process so far. And
which is not great.
Again, not great. And again, I want to stress, he's just turned 22 years old, not the most experienced running back. It's not like he's like Blake Corum, who's had 700 plus live game reps as a runner. Like, Benson, from a traits perspective, has absolutely everything you want in a long-term running back. They have an investment in terms of his draft capital. The team seems to like him. Like, the consensus is that he's like a really hard worker. Jonathan Gannon even gave him crap about like being too serious about the job, which I'm never going to complain about. Like,
No.
I think he's got all of the right tools to be a long-term asset. So this might be one of these things that, like, I'm going to capitalize on this lack of preseason hype. And in the very few leagues that I don't have Trey Benson, I'm going to be targeting him in a trade. Maybe somebody hits the panic button a little early because I still think he has all the traits. But yeah, 2023, not going to happen barring injury.
2024. Yeah, 2024.
Why do
Probably.
I've said 2023.
I've
I'm
done that
living
a
in the
million
past
times.
today, guys. I'm
It's
so
all right.
sorry, but yeah, Trey Benson definitely not going to happen in 2023 because we've already been there. But 2024, I think, is also probably out of the window.
Just want to mention in our batch of July ADP, we're still waiting for August ADP. Benson was RB 15, and you've been banging this drum all offseason. You think that James Conner has been undervalued by dynasty players, RB 35. I'm expecting Connor to be drafted maybe a little bit closer to RB 30 by the time we get, to the season. But for Trey Benson, I don't know how much this moves him down at all, Kate, but I wouldn't be surprised if a couple running backs like Ramondre Stevenson leapfrog him, because you probably just aren't going to get a lot of production out of him in year one.
Yeah, and I think that's all very fair. James Conner, one of my favorite players to target in a trade if you are in a win now position, because again, not going to cost you too much, but I think still has top 12 upside on the 2024 season. So one of my favorite kind of buy low guys, and we always say it, target the running backs, consider them a 1 to 2 year loaner. James Conner fits that mold perfectly. I think this is kind of a good thing for all managers involved, and yeah, we're going to be fine.
Let's talk about Jermaine Burton of the Cincinnati Bengals, because this is a perfect case of why context matters for the preseason. Okay, you and I discussed on a show last week why you need to really watch when these snaps are happening and when they're happening to make a fair assessment on a player. Let's talk about why Jermaine Burton, despite a gaudy stat line, is actually a loser coming out of week one. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want quality professionals that are right for the job. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you hire the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In any given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. Everydayers. On Wednesday's show, we're going to have Matt Williamson answering your Twitter questions. We're also going to discuss the injury to J.J. McCarthy and how that should impact you in Dynasty League, so make sure you tune in for that. But, Kate, let's finish up here with Jermaine Burton, who, this one's tough, had a really good day in terms of the box score, but just didn't play much early in this game. Why is Jermaine Burton on this loser list?
The fact about Jermaine Burton is, again, not necessarily related to the stat line. Caught all 3 of his targets for 82 receiving yards and a touchdown, had a good PFF score. What makes Jermaine Burton a loser for me, though, here in week 1 of the preseason is the fact that he played really late in the game. He played behind a lot of wide receivers in this Bengals offense. And for most of the offseason, there's been a lot of hype that, like, hey, maybe Jermaine Burton wins this wide receiver 3 role. That's a position that's kind of wide open in this offense with the departure of Tyler Boyd. What's the chance that Jermaine Burton can take over that role and start in year 1? And I think we got an answer pretty quickly about what their thoughts are for Jermaine Burton. He played 1 snap in the first quarter, sat until 9 minutes left in the third quarter, and then he played until one of the final snaps of the game. Like, that just tells me where he's at right now in the depth chart. That's not to say he can't climb. We've seen tons of training camp hype about what they've seen from Jermaine Burton, but I think we need to pump the brakes on our immediate expectations coming out of the gate.
Yeah, I will also say we had a quote from Joe Burrow today. They asked him about who's going to replace Tyler Boyd, and he said it's going to be a wide receiver by committee situation. He says he really likes Charlie Jones. Yoshi, who they drafted last year, is going to be part of the equation, and then Jermaine Burton. So even though Burton had this big stat line in the preseason, it's still clear that he's lower on the pecking order. Now, I did see this week, Kate, that he kind of climbed up the depth chart a little bit, was getting more opportunities and practice with the first team. So for that reason, he's a winner. But with basically no production when any of the starters were on the field, and almost all of it came in the second half, it is fair to wonder like what kind of production he might have in year one.
And I want to be totally transparent here because Jermaine Burton was a guy that I had some hesitation about coming out in this pre-draft process. Are you excited about the landing spot? Absolutely, because we don't know what's going to happen with T. Higgins. It seems like a foregone conclusion that he is bound to, at least not be a Bengal. Like, I don't know where he's going to go, but it seems like he's not going to be a Bengal. Jermaine Burton, a little bit older coming out in this pre-draft process, just turned 23 years old. Never had like a true big breakout season. Moved around several different big programs. So I'll give him that. Big collegiate programs, but moved around a lot in college and never really seemed to fit into a program that was off the field concerns. So like that was the context that I approached Jermaine Burton with in the offseason. So the fact that like he has had all of these hypes and exciting moments in training camp, he's worked with the ones, he's had opportunities here. When I just go back to this and his context of when he was playing with who he was playing with, that brings me back to all of these concerns I had in the pre-draft process. Again, it's week one, but it's context.
Yeah. So I'm still excited about Jermaine Burton, but let's hope this week when we see him in the preseason, he's getting more snaps with the first team. If that's the case, then I think we can, even if he doesn't have the big numbers, right? I think if he's playing with the first team and doesn't even catch a pass, to me, that's more telling than him putting up big numbers against future lawyers, doctors, right? All right, Kate, just really quickly before we go, is there any other losers from the preseason that you want to mention? We're going to leave out JJ McCarthy because of the injury. We're going to talk about him with Matt. Anybody else for you? Because I have one that I wanted to mention, but any names for you?
I want to mention both just the Titans backfield in general, because I think that we might just truly be in a holding pattern with this backfield. They have two very talented running backs there with the Tennessee Titans. And I'm so concerned about the level of talent on both sides between Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears that I like which one of these guys is going to have value.
Wow.
I still think it's going to be hard to predict in any given week, because Tony Pollard looked a lot better than I think any of us expected him to. I actually kind of expected him to look pretty good, but like I also really like Tajay Spears. So I'm that situation, despite the fact that it was like good things coming out of the offense, I'm just a little bit worried for fantasy what that could mean for our lineup decisions on a weekly basis.
I don't. I'm starting Pollard every week confidently as an RB2, so I feel good there. Just really quickly, I wanted to mention Justin Fields as a loser. Not that you were really drafting Justin Fields much in your dynasty leagues, unless it's at the very end. He looked okay, right? He was 5 for 6. It could have been 6 for 6 if Mike Tomlin would have challenged the pass. So that wasn't the concern. It's the 2 fumbles, one of which I think was certainly on Fields. The other one might have been on the center, and the 2 sacks. I just thought this was an opportunity, Kate, for Justin Fields to come out and look awesome and like put up multiple scoring drives and make this a real quarterback competition. But coming out of that preseason game, I just feel more confident that Russell Wilson is going to be the starter for Pittsburgh in week 1. That's all.
I don't doubt that you will never give up a moment where you can possibly list one of the Steelers as a loser. So I'm not going to say I'm surprised by this, but I will say that I recently traded away Justin Fields. And even as a person who is, invested in the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. There was nothing he did that wowed me. He has some exciting plays, but like, again, just not necessarily smooth. Like, the handoffs, the fumbles, like all of these are things that we knew were issues. And I still think it's Russell Wilson's job. So like seeing him out there in live action, exciting for him to get a fresh start. But yeah, I looking back to this trade, I made a package deal where I sent Sam Laporta and Kyler Murray for a package of Justin Fields and Sam Laporta for a package of Kyler Murray and Dalton Kincaid.
Oh, easy.
And I'm feeling really good about that right now.
As you should. Yeah. I mean, anytime I can get a little dig on the Steelers is fine. It's all friendly. All right. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen today. Now go make Locked On Fantasy Football podcast your second listen. Get daily insights to the best fantasy draft strategies so that you can win your league this season. You can even find the link to the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast in the description, so you don't even need to go search for it. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Go check out the Locked On Dynasty Football podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Check us out on YouTube as well. You can follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Majuk. I'm at Marcus_Mosier, and we will see you right back here tomorrow with Matt Williamson.